What's up, nerds? It's your boy, the OG GM. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. It is the third day of November 2022 holiday season. It is 64 degrees and cold here at Ventura, California, slash Site B, slash wherever it is I live in Costa Rica. And we're under a hurricane warning of all things. Yeah, because there's a hurricane off the coast of Mexico or whatever. For a while now, I've been talking about doing a deep dive into my favorite beloved campaign setting, Green Ronin's Freeport, and my 8-year long Freeport campaign that I ran at CES Games and Anime. But in order to understand my love for the Freeport setting, you kind of have to understand my love for pirate, dinosaur, jungle island. And just the whole idea of a jungle island with pirates and dinosaurs and lost alien civilizations and giant apes and stuff like that, and Land of the Lost. And in order to understand that, you got to go back to my introduction to fantasy and just the whole idea of, dinosaur, jungle, pirate, island. And of course, that goes back to Ray Harryhausen and watching Ray Harryhausen movies on TV when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, growing up in the San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles, California, we had cable wasn't a thing yet. So you had UHF channels and you had public domain channels. You had Channel 5, Channel 13. And on the weekends, you would have Elvira's Mystery Theater. You would have Godzilla Theater. You would have stuff like that. And Channel 5, I think it was on Sundays, maybe it was Saturdays, in the afternoon, had a block where they would just do like horror, fantasy, sci-fi films of the time, of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even in the early 80s, as public television was slowly being replaced by cable. So growing up, I had access to this, and on Saturdays, Sundays when this was on, we'd watch Kung Fu Theater, we would watch Godzilla Theater, we would watch the Ray Harryhausen movies, and I was just fascinated with the fantasy world of Ray Harryhausen, the Sinbad movies, the Greek movies, Jason and the Golden Fleece, cowboys versus dinosaurs, all the stuff. Throwing down the dragon teeth to make skeletons appear, the Kraken, the island of Circe, the animated statues. Just the work of Harryhausen captured my imagination long before I ever knew about Dungeons and Dragons. So going into D&D, my first fantasy love, my first idea of fantasy was, pirate, jungle, dinosaur island. And then, of course, we're going into the late 70s, early 80s, and you've got Sid and Marty Krofft's Land of the Lost. You've got, Thundar the Barbarian. You've got all these great pirate movies that are coming out, combined with all these great early fantasy, films. Hawk the Slayer, Dragon Slayer, Lady Hawk, Sword and the Sorcerer, Deathbringer, all these. And again, this just reinforces my love of that genre of just, jungle island, populated, lost civilization, dinosaurs, pirates, settlers, aliens, talking skulls, the whole thing. It just constantly through my early childhood, early life, this was what I was exposed to. And as I'm playing D&D, that is just, what I'm trying to recapture. The imagery for me, for my early D&D, was Ray Harryhausen, was pirate, jungle, dinosaur, Land of the Lost Island, right? So time progresses, more and more cable stuff, we're seeing more and more of these things. Isle of Dread becomes a adventure setting, and that was just like, oh my god, a undiscovered island populated by lost colonies and lost civilizations, plus pirates, plus dinosaurs, plus every trope, cliche of Jungle Island. Dinosaurs, aliens, giant talking apes, lost civilization, slee stacks, ancient technology, Atlantis. The dangers of Isle of Dread, the dangers of surviving in the jungle, Tarzan, all that stuff that was my childhood was just Isle of Dread. And as D&D grew, we had more pirate-themed adventures, more island-themed adventures, more nautical adventures. Other people had this same love for Pirates of the Caribbean / dinosaurs / Ray Harryhausen / Saturday Morning Thunder the Barbarian, / pulp jungle Tarzan adventures. So, and then of course we got Pirates of the Caribbean, the ride, who was, very big in Southern California. Everybody who went to Disneyland, Pirates was like one of the first rides you always wanted to go on around them. It was becoming, sort of an iconic ride at Disneyland, and then of course we had the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and then we just have again this resurgence of pulp that leads us into Green Ronin's Freeport. And the very first, my very first image of Green Ronin's Freeport, even before I knew what the setting was just a picture in a gaming magazine. It said Freeport, Island of Adventure, and it had some guys on a boat. The picture is linked at the front of this video, fighting what looked like shark people. And I was like, I have to get this setting. So I got the first part of the Freeport trilogy, read it, loved it. Dinosaurs, pirates, lost civilizations, ancient cults, aliens, a little hint of Super Sentai, and to top it all off, Lovecraft. So when I described the campaign setting to people, and I described the first three adventures, it was, okay, imagine Pirates of the Caribbean, the ride, and you're going down Pirates of the Caribbean, and you go down the hill, and then you see the two ships battling, and then you turn the corner, and there's that city scene, where they're singing, and the pirates are attacking the city, and they're, don't tell them, and all that thing. All right, imagine that, and combine that with Tortuga from the Pirates of the Caribbean island, and that is Freeport. And then add H.P. Lovecraft, and that is the Freeport campaign setting. So imagine Pirates of the Caribbean meets H.P. Lovecraft. So pirates, dinosaurs, ancient cults, aliens, dragons, lost civilizations, super tech, a little bit of Super Sentai, and H.P. Lovecraft, Lovecraftian horror. All that was the first three adventures of the setting. And that first chunk was like 2 years, 2 years straight. Every week for 2 years, I was running the Freeport trilogy. And I was just taking these small little zine-sized 32-page adventures and just creating this amazing world, because everybody loved playing around in this city that was built by and run by pirates. Of course, yes, a city built by, run by pirates doesn't really make sense, except, of course, if you go across the ocean here to Catalina, and you sort of have a city that was built on an island that was kind of built by, quote-unquote, pirates, criminals, whatever you want to call them. It has a casino. It has all this wildlife, but then it also has, the city, and then it also has this hundreds and thousands of years of culture and history and archaeology on the island of Catalina. So here in, Site B in California, we sort of had our own Freeport. And just that, and Freeports exist. The whole idea of pirate Freeports during the golden age of piracy. Tortuga was a real place. So there was historic background connected to this. Plus, pirate love was big when I was starting to run the campaign, because Pirates of the Caribbean, the movie, and pirates, just everything was pirate. There were pirate toys, pirate games, pirate movies, pirate TV shows, fantasy TV shows. We're going into the early 2000s, and just anime, and everything was fantasy, and just that, Indiana Jones, and just that love. So there's so many things that just catapulted off each other that I was able to tell the story of the first three Freeport modules. And by then I was hooked on the campaign setting. Other people were hooked. They wanted to do more. So we did the next one, which was Black Sails over Freeport. And that ended up lasting another 5 years. Plus we had 2 spin-off campaigns that I ran in connection to Freeport, based upon the same world, because now Green Ronin had given us a map of the world, and I was like, oh my god, this world is just amazing. We have this whole weird alternative take on typical fantasy fiction. The gnomes are the bad guys, and just, there's this whole thing about this imagery of, without getting too much into it, just imagine gnomes that are bad guys that live in volcanic caves and ride giant bats and perform nighttime pirate raids on other cities, flying down on these giant bats. that's just one of the countries, and then we have had sort of a Middle Eastern country that was heavily influenced by ancient gods. We had this moving Lovecraftian horrors that kept showing up. So now we had this world that combined classic fantasy, Middle English crusades with sort of bizarre takes on typical fantasies. You know, the gnomes were the bad guy, dwarves were actually lived on the surface, elves were nomadic and you hardly ever saw them. You know, we had piracy, but we also had like technology, and you had cannons, you had lost alien civilizations. There was a little bit of Super Sentai because there was this group called the Fathom Five, which were basically a Super Sentai team, but an evil Super Sentai team who came from an alternate universe called Freeport, and you had all that, and then we had player characters crossing over from Freeport into the alternate universe of Freeport, and you had the whole Lovecraftian horrors, and, you know, these guys trying to summon the Yellow Plague, and we used Jubilix usually, or Orcus, to replace the Lovecraftian stuff, because, you know, it was just easier to have Jubilix replace Cthulhu. They never said Cthulhu, but it was always the Yellow Plague, and it was always just, you know, tentacle monsters. And it was like, you know, it's just going to be Jubilix and Orcus because I love Orcus. And I was able to bring in the stuff from Slumbering Tsar and Rapanathuk and all the Orcus stuff that Necromancer Games was doing, and combine those two worlds. So by the time we were getting to the end of the Freeport campaign, I had one campaign set on Freeport dealing with the aftermath of the Freeport trilogy. I had a second campaign set in the main continent where we were basically going through against the giants and dealing with that whole thing. And I had a third campaign set in the land of Hexworth, which was basically, imagine a lawful good kingdom run by paladins that is constantly on a crusade to stomp out evil. And of course, it's the crusades, so really it's the church trying to make money by constantly sending people out to stage these wars. And plus you have these evil gnomes on giant bats. And then I ran a campaign about people trying to be, basically, was kingmakers, settlers that had, Hexworth had claimed some land. These guys were given land deeds, and that was the second campaign, and they were trying to establish a city called Smithton, and that's a whole separate chapter to this. So just going back to how my love for Freeport started, you got to understand my love for pirate, dinosaur, jungle, Lovecraftian, lost civilization island. And to understand my love for that, you got to understand my love for, Isle of Dread. And to understand that, you got to go all the way back to, the 70s, growing up, watching public access TV and my exposure to Ray Harryhausen fantasy. So if it wasn't for Sinbad, if it wasn't for those skeletons, if it wasn't for those dinosaurs, if it wasn't for Land of the Lost, it wasn't for Thundar. Just so many factors went into creating my love of this genre that allowed me to finally have a campaign setting that I could fit in every. So that's why that's my favorite campaign setting. I'm always like, can I run this again? I love Slumbering Tsar from Necromancer Games, and there's just a perfect section in the Freeport world where I can place the whole Slumbering Tsar campaign setting. So that was always one I wanted to do too. That would have been the third spin-off from the standard Freeport game, would be running a game in the Slumbering Tsar, but it never happened. But yeah, and either other people were starting to do, pirate, jungle, desert island, and then we're running 5th edition and Tomb of Annihilation comes out, and I'm like, oh my god, it's pirate, jungle, dinosaur island with a Sarasak, Tomb of Horrors, with all the, giant apes, lost civilizations, aliens, just all the things I love. So obviously Tomb of Annihilation is my number one favorite 5th edition Wizards of the Coast campaign setting. For me, Tomb of Annihilation is the most D&D setting that Wizards of the Coast ever created, because for me D&D is not Knights or Lord of the Rings or any of that. For me, D&D is Ray Harryhausen. It's Thundar the Barbarian. It's Sid and Marty Krofft's Land of the Lost. It's Johnny Quest. It's for me, D&D is Pirate, Jungle, Dinosaur, Island. So that is why I love Freeport, and we're going to try and revisit my Freeport love during the month of November, because during the month of November every year for 9 years, I ran a holiday-based adventure called Night of the Dire Turkey, and we will talk about that in a separate vlog. Until then, if you want to hear more about me talking about Freeport, let me know. If you never want to hear me talk about this ever again, let me know. Till next time, I'm the OG GM. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and stay warm, and happy holidays. I'll talk to you later. See ya. Pirate, Dinosaur, Jungle, Alien, Island. With Lovecraft.